So I wanted to think back to situations where you feel like your attitude or your actions might have been influenced by something that somebody said to you. So, for example, you ever been persuaded to eat more vegetables? Or what about go to a specific school, like USF? Or even vote for a particular president? All of these are examples of rhetorical situations. These are situations that can be shaped by persuasive messages. And that's what we're going to focus on in this video. Now, the reason that we want to pay attention to the rhetorical situation or why it's useful to know about it is twofold. First of all, it's really useful for analyzing speeches. It can help us figure out why a speech is effective or ineffective, or ethical or unethical, and therefore whether or not you feel like you should actually be persuaded by it, or whether or not you should use some of the tactics for your own speaking. And that leads me to the second reason why we want to know about the rhetorical situation, because it can help you actually prepare and deliver an effective and ethical speech. And those are really the two reasons why we're pursuing communication and public speaking and rhetoric during the course of this course, is because we want to be better analysts of communication and also better practitioners of it. So, this is the first part of a multi-part video series, and part one is going to focus on what is the rhetorical situation. So, while the roots of the rhetorical situation can be traced back to ideas discussed by Aristotle and other Greek theoreticians of communication, it really kind of comes together as a concrete set of ideas through Lloyd Bitzer. And so, Lloyd Bitzer was a rhetorical scholar who published a scholarly journal article called The Rhetorical Situation in 1968. And so in it, he was really trying to figure out what makes rhetoric rhetoric and not any other kind of communication. And he posited that rhetorical discourse comes into existence as a response to situation, in the same sense that an answer comes into existence in response to a question or a solution in response to a problem. So basically, what he was trying to say is that the defining characteristic of rhetoric is that it responds to a situation. So let's unpack that a little bit further. Lloyd Bitzer said that there are a number of essential components of a rhetorical situation, and these are the components or the elements that we always want to keep in mind when, again, we're evaluating the quality of a speech or when we're actually preparing to speak ourselves. So the first important element is context, and he meant context in two registers. First of all, the very kind of discrete situation that you're in, the occasion that you're speaking in. So if you're delivering a eulogy, the context would be at a funeral. If you're delivering an awards acceptance speech, you're at an awards ceremony. So context means, again, that narrow or discrete occasion, but also kind of the larger social political context that's relevant at that moment. What president is in office? Is there a war going on? What kind of social movements are happening at that particular point in time? You want to think about all of those things as you're deciding, again, kind of what to say and how to say it. One of the most important parameters of the context is the exigence. And the exigence is the problem. So the exigence in this context, or the problem, is whatever the thing is that needs to be fixed or changed, and that people, the audience, are capable of fixing or changing. And we'll talk a little bit about what is or isn't a rhetorical exigence in a second. Of course, as always when we're thinking about rhetoric, we want to think about our audience. Now, a rhetorical audience has to be an audience that's capable of being persuaded and also capable of taking action vis-a-vis whatever the problem is, whatever the exigence is that needs to be fixed or changed. We also want to think about the speaker. The speaker, when we're thinking about the speaker, we're thinking about what kind of reputation the speaker brings into a speaking situation with, but also what kind of persona or character the speaker builds in the speech itself. So is the speaker funny? Are they serious? Are they formal? Are they informal? Are they really, articulate? Do they speak more simply or colloquially? All of those kinds of things are things that matter in terms of what the speaker is able to say or not say, or how they're able to craft their speech. And then finally, purpose. What purpose is the speaker bringing to the situation? What do they actually want to achieve? What do they want to convince or impact about the audience? So all of these different elements of the situation, the rhetorical situation, offer opportunities and constraints to the speaker in terms of what they say and then how they actually say it. Let's go through a few examples of that. So one, let's think about the exigence or the problem. Now, right, earthquakes. Earthquakes are a problem, but they're not exactly a rhetorical exigence because there's nothing that you can say that any speaker could say to prevent an earthquake from happening. I mean, we can barely even predict when an earthquake is or isn't going to happen. But let's say the problem or the exigence is that people in San Francisco aren't prepared. They don't have their earthquake kits ready. That could be an exigence, a problem that actually could be fixed, that could be changed through persuasion or through rhetoric. Now think about your audience. Let's say that you were addressing an audience of elementary school kids. The kinds of experiences they have, their level of knowledge, you're going to have to adjust for that. Let's say you're trying to convince them to be prepared for an earthquake, right? The way that you talk about earthquakes, the way that you explain why earthquakes happen or why we need to be prepared for them is going to be different than, for example, whether or not you're convincing an audience of college students, say USF students. And so you always want to, again, think about what sorts of, again, values, experiences, knowledge levels your audiences are bringing to that situation. And therefore, again, that offers certain opportunities and certain constraints about what you can and can't say. Speaker. And this is really interesting, right? Think about what kind of speakerly persona you as a speaker or a speaker is bringing to the table, and therefore how that again can constrain what they can or can't say. Let's say Barack Obama talking about race, right? Because of Barack Obama's specific positionality, the fact that he's a black man, he has parents of different races, he can talk about race in a very different way than, say, Joe Biden, right? And so again, their particular persona, their positionality, their background enables them to approach the same issue in different kinds of ways. Now, finally, let's think about purpose. Say you're talking about the war in the Ukraine. Now, if your purpose is just to inform your audience about what's going on, you would have a very different set of things that you could say, or perhaps that you wanted to avoid, versus if your purpose was actually, say, persuading them to give money to causes, for example, compensating for victims of the destruction caused by the war in Ukraine. So this is just a quick and dirty overview of the rhetorical situation and what you want to think about in terms of those different elements or parameters of the situation when you're both evaluating the effectiveness of a speech and when you're preparing to speak yourself. Now, take a look at the next video where I'm going to do a more in-depth example analysis of the rhetorical situation in practice.